Welcome, everyone, to Fulfilling the Promise of Talent with a lot of great partners up here on stage. I think everyone has a handout. If you need a handout, we have some extras here, and just appreciate the opportunity to share some of the work and present a little bit. Just want to present some of the panelists and say a few things. So in your handout, Rosie Cloud, who is from the National Promise Campaign, the College Promise Campaign, she had a little emergency this morning. She's fine, but I am standing in here on the panel and doing the moderating here this morning. So my name is Eric Bann from the Dallas County Promise at the Commit Partnership. Would like to introduce our panelists. To your right, my left, Alfreda Norman from the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas, Chemene Crawford from the Dallas County Community College District, and Rick Lopez from Garland ISD, the superintendent of Garland ISD. So we're really privileged to be here today, kind of sharing a little bit of story of Dallas County and how the community has come together. And I'll be facilitating a few questions and answers and just a little bit. So the format here, I think, is we're going to take a few minutes each to kind of help tell the story of some of our different areas and how the Dallas County Promise impacts us, and then reserve enough time, at least about 20 minutes to 25 minutes at the end, just to have a nice conversation so you can feel free to ask questions to the panel. So with that, we will begin. So filling in for the National College Promise Campaign, we are part of that. So the College Promise Campaign is really focused on making the first 2 years of college tuition free and to prepare the 21st century workforce. So we're privileged to be part of this movement here in Dallas, but the movement is a national movement. So the campaign, it's a nonpartisan initiative to build broad public support for this work and the importance of workforce development across the country, and the importance of college affordability as well. The vision of the College Promise Campaign is 21st century education. So it really seeks to increase the social, economic, and civic mobility of students, again, by creating affordable and achievable college pathways. So the work that the College Promise Campaign does nationally is convening leaders from business, philanthropy, government, and education, sharing research, best practices, high-impact policy designs, and financial sustainability models. We in Dallas have benefited greatly from being part of this national campaign and really learning from others around the country, particularly Tennessee and some of our colleagues across the country. And so the campaign promotes and supports the scaling of Promise solutions for students, families, and communities. So there was about 53 Promise programs in 2015. This movement is growing rapidly. So it's over 300 plus Promise programs across the country. And it's just a fun time and a fun association to be a part of at this moment. So a little bit of the impacts here you can see from some of the Promise campaigns that have been in place for longer. The Detroit Promise with pretty big increase in persistence rates, fall to spring. Kalamazoo Promise, which a lot of people are familiar with. It was kind of a founding Promise initiative up in Michigan as well. El Dorado Promise, and then probably the most visible is the Tennessee Promise, again, that we're modeled after here in Dallas, increasing a lot of community college retention rates and college completion rates across Tennessee. So about a year ago, the National College Promise Campaign, along with the Commit Partnership and the Dallas Community College District, really organized the strategy for Dallas County, and we had a wonderful launch event last May at Adamson High School here with the board chair of the Promise Campaign, which is Jill Biden, and just had a great launching and initiative, and I think we're here today to kind of share a little bit about that Dallas story. So I'm going to ask Alfreda from the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas to kind of start us out with the why Dallas County and talent in the economy.
Hello, everyone. So you're probably thinking, the Federal Reserve, like what is the Central Bank of the United States doing on the stage? And so I'm going to give you just my quick, fast little commercial about what we do, just as a reminder. As the Central Bank of the United States, we serve the interests of the American public by informing and influencing our nation's monetary policy and fostering financial stability and delivering quality services to U.S. government and financial institutions in our region. And so my job really is just to talk about the importance of investing in human capital for the country. So I'm going to start from a macro point of view, then I'm going to work my way to Texas, and then I'll work my way to Dallas County. And I've got myself notes here so I stay on time. So the national perspective is starting with gross domestic product. Everyone's heard of GDP. It's one of the primary measurements of a healthy economy. And GDP growth is comprised of growth in the workforce plus gains in productivity. Now, I'm not sure if everyone is aware of this and probably isn't watching this every day, but male and female prime age labor participation rates have declined in the United States over the past 20 years, even with people with college degrees. And the reasons for that is our country, it could be that our country has less generous maternity and child care policies than other countries. We have higher incarceration rates. We have poor health outcomes, and we spend less on on-the-job training and job search assistance programs. And then presently, we are experiencing a structural change right now in our country. Our population is getting older, and they're aging out of the workforce. Baby boomers, or the silver tsunami, is now and will continue to contribute to negative growth in the working population and shortages in skilled labor. Dallas Fed economists note that there's a substantial skills gap in the country. So these middle skill jobs, those are jobs that require more than a high school education, but less than a four-year degree, are getting less and less because they need new skills. So middle skill jobs require, as I said, require the education or training beyond high school. These jobs make up the largest part of the labor market in the United States and in each of the 50 states. At the same time, industries are being transformed by technology-enabled innovation, artificial intelligence, globalization, and we know that labor markets are evolving as a result. And we're all conscious of the accelerated pace at which knowledge and skills are becoming obsolete, requiring workers to face the reality that they must get more education and workforce training to develop new skills and knowledges for the jobs of the 21st century. By 2020, 65% of all US jobs will require education and training beyond high school. Workers must upskill. When middle-skilled jobs go unfulfilled, US businesses expand more slowly, and the nation's growth is impeded. So, what are the middle-skilled jobs? Electricians, truck drivers, dental hygienists, paralegal, carpenters, plumbers, healthcare workers. These are middle-skilled jobs. And so that's the context for the conversation today. Our nation must find innovative ways to grow the U.S. workforce and improve its productivity. And so for the past few years, our community development group at the Federal Reserves have been studying the workforce ecosystem, and we've learned a lot. And one of the things we learned, obviously, is that there is no silver bullet for this. But one of the most important things is, we think, investing again in human capital and education and skills training is so important. There's no guarantee that more education will lead to economic prosperity or economic mobility. There are many factors in play, such as your natural ability, your family environment, inheritance, and even health. But there's correlating data that shows that earning a four-year degree represents a 146% earning increase over those without a high school diploma. And that's across the country. Additionally, education is very good insurance against unemployment. We've also learned that a cradle-to-career strategy is really important all across the country. Why? Because 5 million children lack the cognitive and social skills to progress when they enter kindergarten, and they continue to struggle. So coming down to Texas, now that I've talked about the macro, is that Texas has really taken a big step in an audacious goal to have a 60 by 30 vision. As you can see on the slide there, in 2015, the state of Texas set a huge goal that by 2030, 60% of Texans ages 25 to 34 will have a certificate or a degree. And in the next slide, you can see that Dallas County, like major metros across the country, has real headwinds to getting that goal achieved. You can see the numbers. And they have to think of two very important issues when they're thinking about this work: equity and workforce alignment. The next slide shows that while there's good progress, which is the blue line, the dotted line shows the need that where we should be and the trajectory where we should be. And currently we would come up short if we don't have scalable and consistent programming and effort at this. And then the next final slide shows the gaps that exist and that need to be bridged, available jobs and credentials that are needed for qualifying for those jobs. There's a gap. There's a mismatch of industry sector job openings and the skill sets of workers. And finally, plugging the hole in the talent pipeline. Half of Dallas County high school students enrolled in college don't earn a credential or a degree. That's the exciting and fun news. So now that we're down, we need someone to take us up.
It's kind of like watching the 5 o'clock news or something, but luckily we have some uplifting information. So Dr. Chemene Crawford.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Chemene Crawford, the Associate Vice Chancellor for Student Resources for the Dallas County Community College District. And I am on the job probably month 8 right now. As far as, thank you, as far as this particular job is concerned. But I'm here to speak on Dallas County Community College District. I'll refer to it as DCCCD because it's a mouthful, and our response to the needs that were just discussed for Dallas County. And that, of course, would be the Dallas County Promise. Slide. There we go. Okay, you've heard about the 60 by 30 gap, and every district has a response to this in Texas. And, you know, just putting it out there, your promise can be whatever your community needs it to be. And we recognized in Dallas County, and you probably have too based on what you've just heard, that we have a huge gap. And so this is our response to that gap. We have our early college high schools. We work closely with our school districts on dual credit, early college high schools. You all have heard about some of those. We have had very successful early college high schools in that many of these students graduate with an associate's degree before they actually get their high school diploma. And so the next piece of that, of course, and again, that is a credential, is the Dallas County Promise. Our promise is different in that we basically offer it to any high school senior in certain schools who do 3 things, and they basically need to pledge, apply, and enroll. And then we also have a version of a Dallas County Promise, which is under the guise of leveling up, recognizing that there is a gap. We can't just ignore anyone who isn't just out of high school. We do recognize, and our numbers show in our county, that there is an employment gap. There is a lack of skill set. And so our response to that is, again, level up, or what we call our parent promise. And that is for folks who aren't just out of high school. It is for the parents of promise students, and those parents have to be pursuing some credentials that's associated with the middle skills jobs that were just talked about. So again, this is our version of addressing this. This is not the only way that Dallas County Community College District is addressing the 60 by 30 gap, but it is a huge part of what we're doing to try to address the needs of our county. Just to give you a full circle view of all of this, we are taking a holistic approach to this. We are not just enrolling students. Having been an enrollment management person for many years, I understand the pitfalls of that. And so I'm very happy to see the approach that we're taking in Dallas. It is a high school transformation. This is our promise version. We work with Commit and the ISDs to transform the expectations of the students. We work with the counselors We basically help them redefine what college would mean for these students. And we've bridged the gap in many ways there. Removing the friction, that's huge. Dallas County Community College District is large. We have anywhere from 90,000 to 130,000 interactions with our community, our students, enrollment. You can do head count, however you want to look at that, but it's very large. And we have bureaucracies just like other districts. Well, when you take on an initiative like this and this impactful, we had to look at ourselves. And you will have to look at yourselves to see where the friction is and where the barriers are. Part of my role as student resources is to look at wraparound services. We all know that students attending college is more than just walking into the building, sitting in the classroom, reading a book, doing the homework, and going home. You know, where does the food come from? Where does the transportation come from? What if mental health services are needed? What if there's counseling needed? What if there are housing insecurities and all those things? So again, we're trying to address not only student success holistically, but we're looking at the student holistically. And then using technology to work smarter. This kind of engagement requires that we work smarter and that we have the data at our fingertips to gather information that is needed in order to plan, implement, evaluate, and improve. And that's what this initiative has been for us. It's not only wraparound for students, but it's wraparound for us. We're looking at all the things that we're doing and reevaluating and planning. And that works, we're keeping. That doesn't, we're moving along. And again, that's what this type of initiative is about and will be about, regardless of what your promise looks like. Finally, this is our promise network. And this slide is super important because it shows exactly the approach that Dallas County, or DCCCD, is taking to the Promise Initiative. We cannot solve the problems that we have in Texas alone. Everyone must work together and move in the same direction. And this slide represents that initiative, that commitment. You can see the commit intervention all the way to our university partners, SMU, UNT Dallas. They're joining in and recognizing that the students, or the customers, if you will, that they serve in Dallas County can be better served by them being a part of the Dallas County Promise. So I'm not going to go through each step. I know we only have 7 minutes and we'll have questions at the end, but I think this is a really great illustration of all of the partners involved in the Dallas County Promise and how we're working together to come up with solutions to our county problem.
Great. Thank you, Chemene. And kind of then moving forward from a school district perspective and a school engagement perspective. So Dr. Lopez, maybe giving your insights and perspectives on Garland ISD as the superintendent.
Absolutely. Before I get started, first of all, it needs to be commended about the partnerships that are happening from the community and the vision of the promise. Now, just to get a scape of who's here, how many of you are teachers? Any teachers in the audience? Okay. Administrators. Who's in education? Raise your hand. So what do we do? Can you just give me a few. What do you do? Raise money for higher ed in the back. Okay, research back here. Regional service center. So we got a quagmire of different type of people here. And I kind of want to center you before I get started. So I want you to take out your phones. You probably already have them out. And I want you to find a school-age child that you're connected to, that you love. Okay? It could be a niece, nephew, a grandchild. It could be your child. But look for a school-age child. Go ahead and do that on your phones. Now, when you see that child on your phone, and if you can't find one, something's wrong with you, all right? That's all I'm going to say. Imagine the guarantee that that person has access to college no matter what obstacles they find in life. I want you to think how profound that is. That's what we're talking about here. That child going to one of my 5 high schools, having the opportunity to have free access to college. That is game-changing, especially with our varied backgrounds. All of us have grown up differently. I grew up poor, okay? So that in itself, if I had that, would have just opened so many more doors probably for my younger brother. Okay? So I just want you to think that that's what we're talking about. That's the scape. That person you love getting through. Well, I'm the proud superintendent of Garland ISD. We call ourselves Garland USA because we're taking over the nation. And we're going to focus on our first promise school. So when they initiated this Dallas County Promise, we have a school that is an early college high school called Lakeview. But a little bit about Garland, so you know what it is. Now, is everybody here from Texas? Who's not from Texas? Okay, there's still time to move. All right. So for those of you that are not, it's a great place to be. But if you want to know the demographics of Texas, look at the demographics of Garland. We almost mirror the Texas average. We're not a small school district. We have 56,000 students, okay? With those 56,000 students, there are 7 high schools, comprehensive high schools. 60% are economically disadvantaged. Almost a third of them are English language learners. 50% are Hispanic, 18% African American, 18% white, and 9% Asian. That's basically what the scope of Texas looks like today. When we look at our county, the county is so big it educates 10%, even though it's one county, it educates 10% of Texas, 1% of the nation, and 75% of the kids in it are economically disadvantaged. So we are a poor county, despite of what you guys see on TV with, the Wives of Highland Park. I don't even know what it's called, but you know, we are very different than what's portrayed on Dallas, right? Or Jerry Jones' World. There's a whole different dynamic that's happening in Dallas, and these people are unlocking the code to have equity and access for all students. So when we talk about Lakeview, we're going to talk about one high school. You could see, if you look in the teal area, that's about what we were getting for kids to get their FAFSA applications. So less than half of our students were actually getting the financial aid that they deserved. Okay, with this initiative, part of it is applying for FAFSA. Okay, so you could see last year, 71% of my students in just that one school applied for their FAFSA application. Now, that created $1.5 million of money that they did not have access to. $1.5 million in the first year of the promise. And if you look right now, we talked today to my principal, we're really at 63%. But why not that remaining 29%? That remaining 29%, remember I said we're about 30% ELL? A lot of those kids, of that 30%, the vast majority are undocumented, and they're afraid to move forward with doing the application process. It becomes an obstacle, it's scary, and that's what we're working on. So when we look at the next slide, we can see a dramatic increase in Lakeview Centennial about students enrolled, an increase of 7%, 69% of the students enrolled in college. How many people can go around touting that almost 3/4 of their kids are enrolled in college? This is the vision of where we're wanting to get to. And this is a very hard measure, because I'm going to tell you that I have to give my hats off to Eric Mann and his team, because we have dashboards that monitor who's doing FAFSA, how many kids are involved. Today he talked to me about how many kids are staying in school. We're going to get a new added part of the dashboard, which is critical to fulfilling kids' dreams. Finally, in Garland USA, we're doing things a little differently. We want them, of course, to complete their financial aid. We want them to graduate high school without remediation, which means they have to have a high score under ACT, SAT, or TSIA. So we want to make sure that they're college ready. We're focusing on prep programs, authentic assessments outside of end of course and STAR to make sure kids are college and career ready. Underneath that, we are expecting to have at least an early college or a P-Tech program, which is a vocational study associates program with an industry partner at each one of our high schools. But some kids aren't ready for that when they come in. Some kids are freshmen and they're just not mature. Well, guess what? We're going to have a scaffold approach that the kids either graduate with 12 hours or an industry certificate if they do not meet the associate criteria coming in out of 8th grade. So our kids are going to be college and career ready. It's a very aggressive vision, and it's something that we're committed to. And finally, they're going to have a pathway of their choice, so they will be immediately employable with an associate's degree, making in some cases more than their teachers. That's the vision of Garland USA.
Thank you, Rick. And I think it's kind of starting to illustrate the partnership and the power of people coming together and working on a common goal. And it's just really fun to be part of it in Dallas County at this moment. I want to remind you that there's an ability to ask questions online. So it's at slido.com, SLIDO.com, and it's hashtag South by Southwest EDU, SXSW EDU, and we're in room 12AB. So those things come up on my screen here, and
I get the first one.
so the first one, we actually have a slide for that. Isn't that impressive? So so we have a couple questions kind of coming in. I think what we'll do is just give you a little sense of the promise and then hit the questions if that is appropriate. So I'm going to see if we can think about how to. All right. So I guess we're being forced to answer questions. Are you seeing the questions up there? Oh, there we go. All right. So I guess we'll start with how is it funded? It's funded from the Community College District Foundation.
Yeah, for DCCCD, as Eric said, our foundation raised several $1 million for a program that was called Rising Star. And they recognized that even though Rising Star has been around for almost, I'd say, 20 years, they recognized that they could do more with the monies that were raised. And if you recall, the promise concept represents a last dollar scholarship. So what our foundation said was this: if you do these 3 things, which I mentioned earlier, if you pledge, you apply and enroll, and maintain an appropriate grade point average, we've got your back. So in other words, if there is a gap between financial aid and your tuition, our foundation's dollars will kick in and pay the difference in tuition. So yes, it is a last dollar scholarship, but as was mentioned previously, there were so many families not taking advantage of the financial aid that they were already eligible for. This brings an awareness to that and then provides that added security that for DCCCD, our foundation has your back. If you're not eligible for what you thought you were eligible for, we will fill the gap with tuition.
Great. I think we'll go to some of the other questions. How did you identify which barriers the initiative would tackle? I think the chancellor of the Dallas County Community College District really kind of challenged the Commit Partnership and the Promise team with this transition issues. And so really try to understand what's standing in the way of kids moving from high school to college and just be relentless about that. And I think we are, with technology and with partnerships, really trying to understand those things. I know that even the meningitis shot here in Texas is a big deal in the transition, and we're rallying to kind of solve that problem with the county judge and mobile health clinics and just every issue that we can kind of run into, rallying multiple partners.
I'd like to expand a little bit upon that. So there's actually meetings that they have talking about the issues that we're facing with each year we learn. So just recently we had one where you presented and facilitated about we're going into this phase. These are the obstacles we're seeing. This is what we need from the school districts to handle. And then the schools districts also talk about some of the things that they're facing. And that created one of their apps, that created their the things that the operating procedures they do. But something as simple as this, okay? Sounds simple, but it's complex. Your high school counselors need to be college counselors. Okay, let me say it again. Your high school counselors need to be college counselors. Things that they're not normally accustomed to, And it's overwhelming because they're going to say, I got to go through all of these files and make sure kids get the right credits, because not every kid's on course. Some kids are getting straight 69s and you don't know if they're going to make it. And high school counseling is tough. And then we're going to add this added layer. Other things. We talked about the meningitis shot. Most of us in regular ed don't even, we're like, what does that have to do? Well, when you're 18, you have to have that meningitis shot before you go in to college. Well, a lot of kids, because it's so expensive, don't get it, and they forego that. And that becomes a barrier. So we discuss all those things and how we're going to front load them, how we're going to start mandatory meningitis shots a little earlier, just all the different things that we're doing, because we want it to be a seamless transition. Last but not least, transcripts. Transcripts become an issue. So now we have an app for that. Okay, so it's one of those things that it's constantly talking and connecting. It's an organic framework. It's not static. It's not something that you make and you sit on it and you watch it evolve. You have to constantly massage it. Okay, and I'm going to put one more plug in. We meet with the Promise people and DCCCD, but in that framework, they're also looking at different aspects of connecting us uniformly, so as school districts, we're not competing for the same providers for industry partners. Okay, that's an added obstacle. Everybody wants access to industry partners. Well, if 20 districts are calling the same partner, most likely you're going to put their hands up and say none to all, right? So we're evolving. We're becoming more, I would say, sophisticated in our approach, but it's constant meeting. It's constant dialogue. It's a true partnership.
Great. Alfreda?
I was just going to say, it's also really important, and what we've learned when we've looked at the ecosystem is it can't be just educators talking to one another either. You have to bring in the rest of the community. One of the roles that we play as convening at the Fed is we convene around the issue that businesses need to wake up and understand that this is something that they have to pay attention to. It's not an externality that someone else is going to fix. It's an investment in their career talent pipelines. And so we also try to work with the school districts or others to figure out how to tell the business community what to do. They don't know what to do, and they want to know what they can do, and we have to give them sort of clear action items. One thing that they have done is that they've been an influence with legislatures. They're able to speak the case to say that this is important. It's an economic issue. And so this is why we care as leaders in our community. So it's important to get as many people and as many voices around the issue as possible.
Great. And I'm scrolling through some of the questions, and there's a few questions I think a couple of these slides will answer. A little bit around engaging business partners and activating student voice. So I think if we can kind of go to the slides, I think a couple of these slides about the promise will help answer those questions, and I'll keep prioritizing and asking the panel as well. Just what is the Dallas County Promise and what are the elements of it? It's a last dollar scholarship covering the cost of tuition with success coaching and career mentoring. So it's based on the Tennessee Promise, all means all, regardless of income or GPA. And we say that, and we're in schools that have above a 50% economically disadvantaged rate, but 3 out of 4 students in Dallas County are economically disadvantaged. So it's when we say all means all, almost all of our kids are economically disadvantaged, so we are there. We include the Dreamer and DACA students, the undocumented students in the Promise, which is very different from other Promise initiatives. We go to the high schools with the highest socioeconomic need, and it's a high school by high school strategy, and we engaged with those high schools. We focus on the high demand careers aligned to the North Texas workforce. We work with the Fed and the Dallas Regional Chamber and Workforce Solutions in United Way to really help understand that and activate those resources. We include university partners to provide options and pathways, both direct and transfer, including SMU, UNT Dallas, Texas A&M Commerce. This includes the success coaching and career mentoring, and we're using data to really just help us all continuously improve. So those are the kind of big ideas. So what happened in year one? We're 18 months old, so we're very new. But in the first year, financial aid went up 7% to 67%. College enrollment at the community college went up 35%. At our lead partner, university partner at UNT Dallas, direct enrollment went up 30%. And so far, fall to spring retention is up 12% to 82%. Again, this is from 9,300 high school seniors, representing 80% economically disadvantaged population and 90% students of color. Last year, Rhode Island launched a promise, and Dallas County launched a promise, and we were the same size. So we are larger than 8 U.S. states as a pilot. And then really the key strategies are the college tuition, the free college tuition message, including the university partners to really bring that clear and simple message, and then the wraparound success coaching, and then engaging business partners with the Dallas Regional Chamber and our career mentoring so that students with business partners are connected to career mentors and then provided work-based learning opportunities, and really standing up things like Salesforce and using the thinking of the Dell Foundation and the EdFi Alliance to really think smart about how we look at our data, work with our data together, and track student progress, and do things like give Garland the alumni tracking capabilities over time so that they can be connected to all their students while they're in and while they're out into higher education. So those are a few things that addressed a couple of the questions here, and maybe I'll kind of go to a few more questions. And this one might be for you, Chemene. How are you communicating with and integrating wraparound service providers, potentially, all of your services around the student?
All of our service providers are part of our network. So it's not just the colleges, it's not just employers. We, again, recognize that our students have many needs. And so we have partnerships across the county. We work with UT Southwestern on some of the mental health issues. We work with the Dallas County Food Bank on some of the food insecurity issues. We have the coaching and the career mentoring. I have a group of individuals who are called navigators, who not only navigate for every student in the district who needs assistance, but they also serve as the success coaches for Dallas County Promise students. And many times students will call them and say, and this actually happened, my house burnt down, I'm gonna have to drop out of school, I don't know what to do, my family is struggling for resources. And the navigator / success coach actually helped them make connections to our partners so that one, the student could stay in school, and two, the entire family could get back on their feet. So this is not just about an educational network. We are tapped into all student resources, or as many as possible. We're just gathering right now, trying to make sure that we have communication and connections with all of the resources, or many of the resources that we know our students need so that they can be successful. And is that a huge endeavor? Absolutely. But again, if we're to serve our students and our county properly, we need to make sure to be connected. And in the days when many of us were known as community colleges, that was the expectation, that we were connected to our community. And so this is just us doing what we are supposed to be doing.
And a
basically.
follow-up question to that is socializing and monitoring the wraparound services. How's the community college approaching that?
We are collecting data on everything. We are monitoring everything. We come up with new report requests almost weekly for Mark out here. We just are always asking him for things. The technology has helped because now that we have the ability to gather information much more efficiently, we're beginning to brainstorm, and I'm saying we as a college district, on all of the different things that we need at our fingertips so that we can do better connecting with our partners. This has forced a conversation across our district of 7 independently accredited colleges, and we're one big network or system. And so it has forced us to improve our communication, not only amongst ourselves, but with our community partners. So there's a lot of gathering and looking at data and making phone calls, and again, making connections to make sure that our students have the resources that they need.
Great. This one seems to be for Rick in terms of high school counselor ratios are ridiculous. What is your counselor to student ratio, and did y'all hire more counselors as part of this effort? We are in Texas.
Oh, nice. So the counseling is still a need that we're trying to fix. We have 7 counselors at each of our 6A high schools. So out of those 7, we still are revamping our framework and our needs analysis because Basically, 4 of the 7 are your traditional counselors. Then we have a light counselor, which is traditionally your response to students that are in crisis. We have a CTE counselor that's in charge of putting all the frameworks together, from our P-TEX to our CTE courses. We have a very innovative Gilbert Reed Center. And then we have our head counselor. So when you look at the 7, on paper it looks good, but in practice we need more, especially for what we're doing. So what I call is balancing staff ratios. We're looking for excess so we can balance, but it is a need. And my wife is a high school counselor, so if I don't do it, I will hear about it every night, just so you know.
Can I interject? I'd like to interject something really quickly along those lines, that everything that we are doing, we're approaching it from a scalable perspective. So eventually it's not going to be 2 different populations being served. So everything that we do, we're thinking, okay, what if we made it this big? What would that look like? So that eventually the entire network will change.
It's also important for the community-based organizations to really think about how they fit into this as well. And they're sort of looking at the whole spectrum. So how can they be helpful around the issues of transportation, or how can they be helpful? We have organizations that do financial counseling, coaching rather. So as students get prepared to make the transition to work, or as they're planning to their college needs, because there is a financial aspect around that, how do you get people engaged to help families do that? On the other end of the spectrum, there's even work to do college savings accounts for kindergartners, so that, again, the seeds are planted early for parents and families to think that college is attainable. And so all this work that is happening, great work that the community college district is doing in the schools, but then galvanizing the rest of the community, the rest of the ecosystem around this promise, it has long reach, and it's very powerful.
Gotcha.
I want to extend one more thing. So the counseling in the high school is one part, but because this really begins in middle school, that's the other piece that we're looking at. We have 3 grade levels in our school district, 6th, 7th, and 8th. And systemically, we don't have even a counselor for each grade level. So we have 2 counselors for about 1,200 kids, and we're adding more responsibilities. So we're very aware of what we're doing in Garland. By the way, I barely started my 2nd year, so there's a lot of change coming, right? So I started in January of 2018, so I just barely started my 2nd year, and we're looking at all those staffing ratios. But if you're really looking at it from a view to do it right, you're going to have to look at both levels, because the middle school level is going to prep them for that early college and getting them ready, and then the secondary levels is going to have to carry that torch. So I just
Great.
wanted to put that in.
I'll answer a few quick questions here as they go, and then there was also a question that people can ask questions on the microphone. So let me just address a couple quick questions. One was about student voice and how are we activating student voice. So this year we have instituted with some really talented people on the Promise team kind of a student Promise challenge, and it was organized like the Aspen Challenge, as it was modeled in Dallas ISD. And so we have 10 of our high schools creating competitive 10 students in each of those high schools working in teams to build college culture and activating student voice, and we're learning a lot from that. And we have a great celebration on March 27th of those the results of those activities. So we're really committed to really partnering with our students and really empowering them and activating their voice. Another question was around the higher ed partners from the university, UNT Dallas, Midwestern State, Texas A&M Commerce. Both are all offering direct and transfer options for our families and students. So there are a lot of free tuition pathways for both kind of direct enrollment as well as transfer enrollment. And then another question around state replication or expansion. And so policy implications, how does this work financially, that someone asked? Well, the average Pell Grant is $4,000. 3 out of 4 kids in Dallas County have had a free tuition pathway for a long time available to them. Maybe it just hasn't been organized in a comprehensive way. 6 out of 10 Texas kids are in that category. The average community college tuition in Texas is the third lowest in the nation. So in some ways, we're very close to having a promise now because of the thought leadership and the tax base and the generosity of our citizens. So the foundation dollars cover gaps because Pell's not perfect, so a lot of students with need do not receive full Pell. It's there for them, and also for our undocumented students as well. We hosted through the Chancellor and UNT Dallas, hosted a Texas Promise convening, and we're really supporting San Antonio, Houston, Fort Worth, Austin, and others as they kind of build their Promise strategy, and sharing a lot of tools and ideas and resources. As we stand this up in the next year, that's 5% of American high school seniors, so that's a big deal. Welcome to Texas. And so things we do have to scale. So what does student agency look like at scale? So we've been working with the Dell Foundation and the EdFi Alliance and really thinking about how to rethink the student transcript and empower and build agency in those students, and bringing in other partners in the work like Greenlight Credentials with the transcripting. And then, again, the challenge that we've been given is remove all barriers. So what if college enrollment was like ordering an Uber, that the Promise Awards there, we solved the meningitis shot, the TSI is done in high school as part of CCMR. The transcript now is on blockchain, and kids are empowered and own their own records and move it on their own behalf. All of a sudden, these things become possible. And so that's kind of where we are. We want to leave some time. I'll continue to scroll through this, but we do want to open up the microphone as well. So sometimes just old school shouting in a microphone is a lot better than me scrolling through an iPad.
Thank you. I'd like to get your reaction on a thought regarding the likelihood of success at a community college. My thinking is that from my own research and partnerships with a community college in Maryland, it's a dropout factory across the country, sadly so, because the variables that you're on the hook for are outside of your locus of control. You tend to attract students that have huge gaps in knowledge, and a lot of that is due to cognitive deficits. So affordability is key, but you might be opening the pipeline for more students to enroll and fail. This time they won't owe money, but they'll still fail. So what are you doing, or are you open to doing things that would allow you to predict a student's ability to succeed based on their cognitive profile, and to have pointed interventions that can raise their metacognition, teach the science of learning, and the right skills that they actually need to be lifelong learners? I didn't see any partnership around cognition, and this is obviously what I do for a living, so I'm biased.
I can try and touch on that. I understand exactly what you're saying. And you're talking about predictive modeling in many ways. And what we are doing as a district is we're engaging using technology in new systems that have a component where that is a part of what this does for us. I didn't get down into the weeds on this, but all of this has forced us to redesign our entire student experience. And that meant from application to assessment, to orientation, to all of that. And so the piece that you're talking about is embedded in there. We've had to add it to our processes. We haven't even touched on what we should be doing with that, because again, we need technology. Our size is huge, and we don't necessarily have the individuals who can one-on-one engage with students and do that properly. And so again, we're looking at technology to help us do that. So we're in the process of implementing a system that will help us holistically manage a lot of that. And again, that is a component of it, because you're right, there's a huge gap there.
And I'm going to segue off what she's talking about. So in Texas, we do measure the amount of kids that need to go in for remedial courses. Okay, so part of that threshold, we monitor. We present it to our school boards. They want it minimized. So while we're a very test-oriented school system in Texas, they were smart enough to only give us 5 end-of-course tests that the kids need to pass. Out of those 5, the majority are the freshman year. So that gives us 3 years to really prepare them for either the TSIA, which we use here, ACT, of course, SAT, and then start enrolling them in early college. So you saw the 12 hours that I want to give them, so they're going to start getting a taste. We start embedding our support systems there, and they would be able to understand. It would transfer over because it's going to be also with their personnel, the kids that have deficits, and you already know who's coming in. Now, the other thing that I wanted to applaud DCCCD on this is that in Texas, for the longest time, you had the community college, you had the university system, and then you had your trades and industry schools, right? And the DCCCD is saying education is education, so they're incorporating a lot of those technical schools inside their system. Why is that important? Because some of those technical systems are more expensive to go to than going to a university. And the kids are getting these outrageous loans they go through, and it doesn't equate to the type of job that they're getting. So when we talk about educating kids, it's not just for that academia, traditional, you're going to go to a 4-year system. It's really looking at the whole child, where they fit, and putting them in a place where they'll be successful.
I'd also like to add that on the other kind of upstream, if you will, the Commit Partnership is a collective impact group, very much like Strive, really thinking about this cradle to career continuum. And so really been doing a lot of work on the milestones in order to get students so that they are cognitively, socio-emotionally healthy, that they have soft skills, that they have mentors. And so having those first the pre-K and the early quality childcare and preparation, and then each third grade reading, then the fourth grade, each milestone. So the Commit Partnership is tracking all those things and figuring out the deltas where there is still need. And so that's where more the business community comes in, where foundations come in to figure out how do you strengthen this pipeline along the way. You can't just look at Promise is fabulous, but you can't, if you have to think about the whole pipeline. If you got holes along the way, it won't be successful. You can have kids that are wandering around wasting their grant, their Pels and their scholarships because they're not able to achieve or get to where they need to be for some reason. So we have the mental health community. We have artists are even coming up with programs to help children learn how to be more creative and innovative and find their voice. So there's so many different ways in which you can address all of these issues along the way. Because it is such a complex problem, you've got to work it all along the spectrum.
Great. I think we had another question.
Yes, thank you so much for all of your work, and thank you for sharing your perspectives with us today. I'm really curious, kind of in terms of the process that you developed, in terms of the metrics that you use, and whether or not, what kind of demographic metrics you're looking at. Because when you look at demographics more broadly, more and more students with disabilities are students of color as well. And that's a particular challenge when it comes to making sure that access to higher career paths, higher education can be provided. So I'm curious, kind of, what are the disability components of the Promise efforts that you are overseeing? Thank you.
Great. We're very fortunate to be part of the Commit Partnership, as Alfreda had mentioned here. And so just kind of looking at the pipeline in a very intentional way. We're also working with EdFi and exporting a lot more information out from the school districts so we can case manage and really look at the right kinds of fits and programming. So I think the right answer is it's emerging in terms of being able to kind of really look at that thoughtfully and have all the metrics we need in front of us in a effective, scalable case management way. I know the community college, we've had lots of conversations about questions from schools and families around what are the programming that are appropriate and fit for which types of students with different challenges. So I know we're kind of taking those on one by one, but I don't think we have a comprehensive approach to that currently.
Well, and it's not a new issue. All of our colleges have disability services offices that deal with a spectrum of issues that many of our students have. And yes, our students have issues. These are societal issues, these are their personal issues, these are, you name it. And we have to deal with them because our goal is to help them be successful in an academic environment. And so we have all these mechanisms in place. Some are broader than others. I know disability services, depending on which campus you're at, is massive at some and then small at others. But we do have mechanisms in place that assist those students. We don't keep them on the outside. Again, we have homeless students where it's just a way of life for them. Well, we're trying to help them address those issues as well. And that's why I said it is a massive undertaking. But again, we're here to serve the community and to help the community be better. And so that's why those partnerships are so important, because we do not have the resources to take it all on alone. It has to be done together.
Gotcha. Question?
Yes, thank you for your work. I'm super interested in the beginning of the process of collective action, because collective action can sometimes be challenging. It sometimes doesn't lead to outcomes for kids, but it seems like the work that you're doing is leading to concrete outcomes. We're trying to build something similar in San Antonio around bringing partners together, not just the promise, that's its own work too, but even more broadly than that, for how do we think about the cradle career pathway and so my question is, in the beginning, when you were thinking about establishing trust, galvanizing your partners, trying to get everybody on the same page and flowing in the same direction, what steps did you take to create that network, and how did you make sure that it stayed on course over time?
I might ask Alfreda to speak to that, as she's been working with the Commit Partnership for probably the longest in terms of watching and understanding how hard this is, but at the same time, how impactful it can be if you stay with it.
It's difficult. I mean, we have 300 partners when you sort of add everything up. I've been working in San Antonio on the Opportunity Youth, trying to get that sort of put, so you have to find leaders. And so we've sort of broken it up in 3 parts. We have our what we call early matters, 0 to 5. There's a whole coalition around all the issues for early childhood education, quality daycare, the daycare model, providing, because most students in college are also, they have children, and it's a 2-generation issue. And then the middle part, we have an initiative called Best in Class. And so that whole effort is around bringing in teachers, attracting, developing, and retaining teachers, getting the best teachers. Research has showed the best thing you can do is put the best teacher in a classroom. So a whole nother coalition of people that are working around looking at teacher performance, teacher pay, all the issues around bringing teachers up and bringing low-performing schools up. And then the last piece of the spectrum is this career, this handoff from high school to post-secondary. All of the efforts that need to be involved in that, providing internships and mentorships, apprenticeships, figuring out ways in which you catch students before they leave, figuring out the finances and if they can make it to college. All of the efforts around sort of that where you really lose people is from high school and on. So when you add it all up, there's hundreds. We have meetings to figure out who's talking to the business community, who's talking to the educators. Oh, and then when do we all get together? Because if you're ever just talking amongst, one area, I mean, like just educators or just this, it's triangulation. You're not getting anywhere. And then we bring in the news media. We brought in KERA to have a whole nother community conversation about asset poverty and what happens if we don't take care of this? What if we don't address this notion of asset poverty? So it's a very, and then you have asset funder network. We have all of the foundations and philanthropy working together to figure out the best practices to help families with affordable housing and transportation and food deserts and so forth. This is huge. It's taken, we've been working for 6 years to bring all these, but it's very exciting because this is the only way to solve complex problems.
Yeah.
And then you have leaders along the way. You have leaders everywhere in the community. And this is a local issue. This cannot be solved from a national perspective, and there's never going to be a government program that's going to fix this.
Gotcha. We have a whole lot more questions, and we've been trying to get them in like categories. So we have questions around some IT tools and just the thinking about the promised scholarships. I think we've kind of addressed some of the big buckets, and then be happy to kind of hang out and talk to you individually, just and address questions. I know we just have a minute left. Just any parting conversations or parting thoughts here, as just a few seconds each.
Thank you. Charge on and keep changing kids' lives for the better.
And just remember that promise, this is my new mantra, promise is a state of mind. Our communities need to commit to that and change our mindset so that we can help our communities and our students be successful.
Well, I'm the one that brought the Debbie Downer with all the statistics, but I cannot tell you the things that are working. There are things that are working, and it just needs to it takes leadership, it takes everybody to the table, and it's really quite inspiring to see how communities are addressing these issues.
We'd like to thank you all for being here, and we often say that there's going to be an American city that solves the talent gap and does it with equity and outcomes, and why would Dallas not be the first city to do that? So with that, thank you so much for being here, and happy to stick around and answer questions.